let's take a look at some editing techniques for this door hanger. Now, the idea was to use an imported STL file as a process for learning modeling skills in Fusion. And so we don't necessarily have to exactly match the STL, but we can edit our design as desired to get it the way we want. I'm going to drag the timeline, the history player, back to the first extrusion. And if I edit that feature, I see that I have a thin wall or thin feature extrusion with a wall thickness of 5 millimeters. Now, if I compare that to the original, we might be able to see, it's a little bit difficult to see, but from here to here. So the original was 4 millimeters rather than 5 millimeters. We can see it better down here. And so let's continue on. Now, we don't necessarily have to exactly match the original. We can edit as we want it. Now I'm going to drag to the next step. And in the next step, if I edit that feature, we see that the wall thickness on this one was also 5 millimeters. Now I'll go to the next step. So we'll go through step by step the process to see how this was built. Now if I edit this one, I see that the wall thickness is 4 millimeters rather than 5 millimeters. And so this one's a little bit thinner, and because it's thinner, this arc right here isn't tangent here, and it isn't tangent right there. Now, if we want that to be tangent, then we'll change that to 5 millimeters or change the earlier extrusions to 4 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and say that I want that to be 5 millimeters. And now we see that there is tangent right here and right here. I'll drag it down to the next step and I'll edit that feature. And I see this one is 5.5 millimeters. I'll drag it down to the next step and I'll edit this feature, and I see this one is 4 millimeters. Now I'm going to go ahead and change that to 5 millimeters. Now I'm actually going to make 2 changes on this one, but for now I'm going to change this to 5 millimeters. Now when I do, I see that I have a little protrusion occurring out here, and I might want to change that to even a different number. Let me see how this thing looks. And I'm going to try 5.75. So I can experiment and get a thickness of whatever I want. I'm going to undo that last step. I'll go back to 5 millimeters. And I see that it comes out here a little bit further than what I want, unless I change this one also. So we'll take a look at that. I'm going to go back to the previous, and let's look at our sketch. So I'm going to go to the sketch, and I'll right click, and rather than edit sketch, I'm just going to do show dimensions. And I see that this offset distance right here is 5.75 millimeters. So I'm going to go back to the previous extrusion and I'll edit that feature. I'm going to change that one to 5.75. So make it a little bit thicker. And when I do that, it's now tangent right in here. It isn't tangent over here though. We have to add a fillet in here if we want it tangent over here, because we have these as different thicknesses. But to go back to something that I was pointing out earlier, notice that when we do that thin feature thicken, we end up with this little protrusion in here that we don't want. That's really easy to get rid of. Just hold down the control key, select these 2 faces, and hit delete on the keyboard, and Fusion will remove those 2 protrusions and leave us with our clean hole going through the part. Now maybe I don't want these 2 arcs to be concentric. So let's go back and edit that sketch, and there's a concentric constraint on here. I'm going to delete that concentric constraint, and then I'm going to change maybe the location of the size of this arc. And so maybe I want to put a distance between here and here. This is the center of this arc and this arc. Maybe I want to put a distance between those 2, let's say of 2 millimeters or whatever I want. Let's increase that a little bit more so we can see that. Let's say 5 millimeters. But that will flatten this arc out a little bit more compared to that one if we don't want those concentric. Now if we look at the original model, this is actually quite a bit further down. Let's try 10 millimeters, and we're getting close. Let's say 15, and still let's try 20. And so it looks like it's close to 20, a little bit more than 20. Let's say 25, and so we're getting real close there. We'll try 30. So you see how we can edit a design, a sketch, or a feature after we've created it, and see how that affects our model. I might want to make this come up a little bit thicker, and I might want to reduce this thickness, whatever we want to do to get our model to in the size or shape that we want. Now, what I would probably do on this is run an FEA analysis. So I would put a constraint on these three faces against where it would be against the door, and then put a load on here and maybe put that load in different angles to see how this model reacts in an FEA analysis, and maybe make some adjustment to the design based on the results of the FEA analysis. So that's a quick look at thin feature modeling. I'll put the fillets back on here, so I'll drag this back down here, and because I made those changes, I have one fillet that failed that you need to put in again or just delete it. I'm not sure where it was. I think it was up in here someplace. Let's look at this fillet down here. So I need to find that fillet where it is. So there's one of them. I'm going to delete that, and let's find the other half of that. I'm going to delete that. Another option we could use for this fillet is a full round fillet. And so I'm going to go to my type, and I'm going to tell it a full round fillet, and it says select the center face. I'm going to select this center face, and it's going to do a full round from side to side on that fillet. And so even if I change this thickness, this fillet is always going to do that full round fillet. So that's some ideas editing your design after creation.